Life has a way of touching us with hope in the most unexpected moments. The dreams sketched in the pages of a child's tattered notebook often speak the words their heart cannot say. This story tells of a young boy's longing for family, brought to life through a simple drawing that carries his wishes far beyond the walls of his world. It beautifully portrays the healing power of love and art, weaving a journey where destiny's gentle hand transforms dreams into reality. More than a tale of one child, it echoes the universal quest for love, belonging, and connection that resides within us all. Hi guys, I'm Kaitlyn, and this is the Stories of Echoes channel where I tell my stories, and I hope you enjoy every second of the story. The pale morning light filtered through the grimy windows of St. Catherine's Orphanage, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors. In a corner of the crowded dormitory, 8-year-old Oliver stirred, his tousled brown hair peeking out from beneath threadbare blankets. As consciousness crept in, so did the familiar ache in his chest, a longing for something he'd never known. Oliver sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he gazed around the room. Rows of identical iron beds stretched before him, each occupied by a child with a story similar to his own. Yet despite the shared circumstances, Oliver often felt alone in his dreams of family and belonging. "Up and at 'em, children," Mrs. Thompson's voice echoed through the halls, her stern tone softened by a hint of warmth. "Breakfast in 10 minutes. As Oliver dressed in his faded uniform, his mind wandered to the sketchbook hidden beneath his mattress. It was his most prized possession, a gift from Mrs. Thompson on his last birthday. In its pages, he poured his hopes and dreams, creating vibrant worlds far removed from the drab reality of the orphanage. At breakfast, Oliver sat quietly, pushing soggy oatmeal around his bowl. Across the table, 2 younger girls whispered excitedly about a couple who had visited yesterday, their eyes shining with hope. Oliver's heart sank. He'd long since stopped allowing himself to dream of adoption. "Oliver," Mrs. Thompson called, her lined face softening as she approached. "Why don't you help me in the art room after breakfast? We've got some new supplies to organize." A small smile tugged at Oliver's lips. The art room was his sanctuary, a place where imagination could flourish, despite the constraints of their underfunded institution. As he followed Mrs. Thompson down the hallway, the excited chatter of the other children faded into the background. The art room was a burst of color in the otherwise dreary building. Paintings and drawings covered the walls, a testament to the creativity that thrived even in the most unlikely places. Oliver's eyes lit up at the sight of fresh pencils and paints arranged on the worn tables. "Now then," Mrs. Thompson said, her hands on her hips as she surveyed the room, "let's get these new supplies sorted, shall we?" As they worked, Mrs. Thompson kept a watchful eye on Oliver. She had always seen something special in the quiet, imaginative boy. His talent for art was remarkable, but it was the depth of emotion in his creations that truly set him apart. "Oliver," she said gently, "I've been thinking. The Willowbrook Gallery is hosting a children's art exhibition next month. Would you like to submit one of your drawings?" Oliver's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You think my drawings are good enough?" Mrs. Thompson's smile was warm and encouraging. "I think they're more than good enough, dear. Your art has a way of touching people's hearts." For the rest of the day, Oliver's mind buzzed with possibilities. He sketched during free time, his pencil flying across the paper as he tried to capture the perfect image, but nothing felt quite right. As evening approached, Oliver found himself sitting on his bed, sketchbook open on his lap. The dormitory was quiet, most of the children already asleep. In the dim light, he began to draw, letting his heart guide his hand. Hours passed, and as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Oliver sat back, his eyes tired but bright. On the paper before him was a family, a mother with kind eyes, a father with a warm smile, and between them a little boy who looked remarkably like Oliver himself. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a wish, a dream given form. Mrs. Thompson found him there, still clutching his pencil. Her eyes misted as she took in the drawing. "Oh, Oliver," she whispered, "it's beautiful." In that moment, looking at the hope shining in Oliver's eyes, Mrs. Thompson made a decision. This drawing wouldn't just go to the gallery. She would make sure it was prominently displayed. Perhaps, she thought, it might catch the eye of someone who could make Oliver's dream a reality. As the day of the exhibition drew near, Oliver's nervousness grew. He carefully matted and framed his drawing, his hands shaking slightly as he imagined it hanging in the gallery. What if no one liked it? What if everyone saw the longing in every pencil stroke? The night before the exhibition, Oliver lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, he saw his drawing hanging on a bright gallery wall. He imagined a family, his family, walking by, stopping to look. In his fantasy, they recognized him somehow, arms opening wide to welcome him home. Oliver closed his eyes, clinging to the image. Tomorrow, his drawing would go out into the world, carrying with it all his hopes and dreams. As sleep finally claimed him, a single tear slipped down his cheek, a mix of hope and fear for what the future might hold. In the morning, as Mrs. Thompson carefully packed the framed drawing for transport, Oliver watched with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. His heart was there on that paper, vulnerable and exposed. But as Mrs. Thompson gave him an encouraging smile, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something wonderful. The Sunnyvale Art Gallery buzzed with excitement as patrons milled about, admiring the eclectic collection of artwork adorning its walls. Amidst the crowd, Grace and Daniel Holloway moved through the space, their steps heavy with the weight of years spent searching for their lost son. Grace's eyes, tinged with a perpetual sadness, scanned the vibrant canvases. "I still can't believe it's been 5 years," she murmured, her hand tightening around Daniel's. Daniel nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know, love, but we're here to support the children's charity. It's what he would have wanted." As they rounded a corner, Grace suddenly froze. Her gaze locked onto a small, unassuming drawing tucked away in a corner of the children's exhibition. The artwork depicted a family, a mother, father, and child, rendered in crayon with a raw, emotional intensity that took her breath away. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice quavering. "Look at this." Daniel approached, his brow furrowed. As he studied the drawing, his eyes widened. "It can't be," he breathed. In the bottom right corner of the drawing, barely visible, was a small symbol, a stylized tree with intertwining branches. It was an exact replica of the family heirloom they had given their son before he disappeared. Grace's hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers hovering just inches from the drawing. "It's him, Daniel. It has to be." Daniel's heart raced as he examined the artwork more closely. The child in the drawing bore a striking resemblance to their lost son, the same unruly mop of hair, the same bright, hopeful eyes. "Excuse me," Daniel called out to a passing gallery attendant. "Can you tell us about this drawing?" The attendant, a young woman with a kind smile, approached. "Of course, sir. This piece is part of our children's charity exhibition. It was submitted by an orphanage in town, Sunnyside Home for Children." Grace's breath caught in her throat. "An orphanage," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, ma'am," the attendant continued. "The artist is a young boy named Oliver. He's quite talented for his age." Daniel and Grace exchanged a look of shocked recognition. Oliver, the name they had given their son 8 years ago. "We need to go there," Daniel said, his voice urgent. "Now." They hurried out of the gallery, their hearts pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The drive to Sunnyside Home for Children felt endless, each minute stretching into an eternity of possibilities. As they pulled up to the worn brick building, Grace's hand found Daniel's once more. "What if it's not him?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at both of them. Daniel squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Then we'll keep searching. But Grace, I feel it in my bones. This is our chance." They made their way inside, where they were greeted by Mrs. Thompson, the head caretaker. Her eyes widened as they explained their story and showed her a picture of their son. "Oh my," Mrs. Thompson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oliver, he's been with us for nearly 5 years. We never knew." She led them to a small playroom where a young boy sat alone, hunched over a piece of paper, crayon in hand. As they entered, he looked up, his bright eyes curious and slightly wary. Grace's heart nearly stopped. Those eyes, she would know them anywhere. "Oliver?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The boy tilted his head, studying them intently. "Do I know you?" he asked, his small voice filled with a mixture of hope and hesitation. Daniel knelt down beside him, gently placing the family heirloom, a small pendant with the stylized tree, on the table. "Do you remember this, Oliver?" Oliver's eyes widened as he reached out, his small fingers tracing the familiar symbol. My dream tree," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. Grace knelt beside Daniel, tears streaming down her face. "That's right, sweetheart. We gave it to you when you were very little. We've been looking for you for so long." Oliver's lower lip trembled as he looked from Grace to Daniel and back again. Are you my mom and dad?" "Yes, Oliver," Daniel said, his own eyes brimming with tears. "We are." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a small cry, Oliver launched himself into their arms. Grace and Daniel enveloped him in a tight embrace, years of longing and searching culminating in this one perfect moment. As they held each other, Mrs. Thompson watched from the doorway, her own eyes misty. She thought of the drawing that had brought them together, a simple crayon sketch that had carried the weight of a child's dreams and hopes. In that moment, as Oliver's laughter mixed with his parents' joyful tears, the power of art to bridge gaps, heal wounds, and reunite lost souls was undeniable. The family that had once existed only in Oliver's imagination and on paper was now a beautiful reality. As they prepared to leave the orphanage, Oliver clutched his drawing in one hand and the family heirloom in the other. He looked up at Grace and Daniel, his eyes shining with a happiness he had only ever dreamed of. "I always knew you'd find me," he said softly. Grace and Daniel exchanged a look of pure love and gratitude. Their long journey had finally come to an end, and a new one was just beginning. As they stepped out into the sunlight, the world seemed brighter, more vibrant. The somber halls of the orphanage gave way to the promise of a warm, loving home. And in that moment, Oliver knew that his greatest masterpiece was yet to come, the story of a family reunited, painted with the brilliant colors of love, hope, and the enduring power of a child's dream. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story Don't forget to like this video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel for more touching tales. Every day, we bring you stories that inspire, move, and remind us of the magic in our everyday lives. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always hope. Happy holidays, and see you in the next story.